Craig Relyea, and Sandra, Paul, and I will be sharing how we fast-tracked the creation of a new PDRI tool in less than a year. In fact, CII asked us to do this presentation about 5 weeks ago, so we even fast-tracked this presentation. At the 2016 Spring Board of Advisors meeting, Stephen Mulva introduced us to his vision to transform CII into something we see evolving today, driven by a lot of sectors rather than any one majority business. He challenged us to be innovative and transformative, getting research and white papers completed faster and in different ways. And this vision has allowed the sectors to focus on topics more meaningful to their needs. Now, I was the inaugural chair of the Manufacturing and Life Sciences sector, and along with my co-chair, Paul Williams, who's now the current chair, we knew that we had a lot to achieve that first summer in 2016. In addition to creating the sector's budgets and charters and getting up subcommittees, we also came up with several bold and quick-win research topics. Now, the research you have seen presented this week is a result of several years of activity by the research teams, generally starting one summer and reporting out 2 or more years later. And I'll share that the overall cost for this effort can be between $250,000 and $350,000. Now, our sector had a budget of $180,000 for 2017. And we quickly realized that our bold initiative, Flexible Facilities for Manufacturing, had a small impact on the spend in 2017. And so the opportunity existed for us to do a quick win topic. Now, our manufacturing and life science sector is unique in that there's a building filled with a manufacturing process. This is the Eli Lilly and Company Research and Manufacturing Campus in downtown Indy, where each day people are manufacturing some life-saving medicines within these buildings. But maybe it's beer production, brewing, bottling, and canning thousands upon thousands upon thousands of our favorite beer by Anheuser-Busch. Maybe it's building some of America's best and safest automobiles by Keaton and the folks at this General Motors facility. Or possibly a consumer personal health facility with products being manufactured by our sector co-chair, Ann Ramsey, and others at Procter & Gamble. And these are the examples of the different manufacturing products and processes that make our sector unique. Now, during our research topic brainstorming, we discovered that many of our sectors had modified the PDRI for industrial to better reflect the unique aspects of their needs. And some had even added elements from PDRI for buildings, since the building is a very major component of the manufacturing facility. And we discovered that some had added other elements that were not addressed in the original PDRI tools. Portfolio management, project controls, estimating, IT, loss prevention, automation and controls were not in any of these tools. And these were added to these homegrown tools. Our solution? Let's take what we know and make it better. And we decided to create a standard tool for our sector, building upon the previous PDRI research by Arizona State and all the research team members 20-odd years ago, and update it to represent 21st century processes, focusing on both combining building and industrial to meet those unique aspects for our sector. Now, traditionally, CII research are studies that's applied research, and we're generally initiated by the hypotheses that are generated from the essential question, or relevant data is gathered through surveys, interviews, case studies, and so on, to prove or disprove those hypotheses. Now, we took Stephen's message to heart to be transformational and innovative, so we pushed the envelope a little bit to fast-track our research effort. We requested a sole source provider to oversee this research, taking months off a bid cycle. Plus, we wanted to build upon the existing PDRI tools and not start from scratch. Now, working together with Kim Allen and the Sector Leadership Committee, we achieved a change in that research process. So today, CII recognizes a new way to develop research improvements through a streamlined process called advanced development. It's a practice of using the earlier research and likely feasible solutions to create the tools and processes to improve a specific sector's business needs. We contracted this advanced development scope of work with Valency, a CII member company, who has been training and facilitating PDRI across many sectors for many years to help lead this effort. We set a target to complete by the end of 2017, and that was kind of ambitious. So to share how we performed our advanced development, let me turn this over to Sandra, who led our team, in my opinion, to a very successful conclusion.
Thank you, Craig. So within CII, there had never been a research project that had been done in an 8-month period of time. But the MLS sector thought this was a pretty unique opportunity. As Craig shared, the majority of the members within the sector were already using PDRI. So that meant that they knew the benefits well, but they also recognized the shortcomings. So when we take a look at this project, it was a fairly low risk, high reward opportunity in the eyes of the sector. So as we walk through the presentation today, one of the things we're going to focus on is those critical success factors that we found in delivering this first advanced development project. So the things we're going to touch on, we'll go through how our team went about planning this particular project. We'll touch on some of the key organizational and cultural considerations that came into play. And then we'll share the project execution approach that we executed. From there, we're going to share the outcomes that we had and how the PDRI for MLS template is contributing to the front-end planning effort of those projects that are primarily manufactured within a facility and include both process as well as building-related scope elements. So although this is from the MLS sector, I'd encourage you to take some notes as you go, because I think you'll find some of the new elements and the work that's been done probably has pretty broad application across the sector groups. So in terms of looking at some of the most important steps that we took, starting with the scope of this project, we worked really closely with the sector to set out a statement of work before the project actually was initiated. And that's a little bit different than how it normally works within the applied research. But what that allowed us to do was to clearly define what the scope of work we were going to tackle was, and that involved combining elements from PDRI Industrial, PDRI Buildings, as well as a number of other recommendations we anticipated would come from the team. We were also tasked with addressing some of the areas that weren't fully formed in any of the PDRI templates today, and making sure that at the end of this, we ended up with better description of the deliverables that were expected in each area. So in terms of what those steps look like, one of the decisions that we made was to ensure that the team followed the existing and very proven PDRI development methodology. So we'll quickly walk you through the steps that are involved in developing a PDRI template that were followed by this team. The very first step is actually developing a PDRI element list. And in our case, that was primarily from PDRI Industrial, some from Building, and then new elements that were added and proposed by the team members. The next step involves conducting a series of weighting workshops, because the intent is to get as broad a cross-section of input as you can from industry professionals related to that particular topic. From there, we went through finalizing the PDRI element descriptions and the element list. And the feedback that comes from the weighting workshops gives us both the qualitative feedback as well as the quantitative results to be able to form that list. The next step that we followed was actually conducting the validation testing. And it was a combination of both completed projects with actual results as well as in-progress projects, which allowed us to test the facilitation flow. And the final step in the development of a PDRI template is to actually publish the publications. And in our case here, for an advanced development, the team settled on a research summary as well as the Excel template. As we went through that kickoff workshop with the team, one of the things we worked really closely on was the coordination planning, because all of this had to happen by December of 2017 with a kickoff in May. So another important, what I would consider to be a critical success factor, was the commitment that we actually had from the members of the sector. The sector had formed probably about 6 months prior to this project kicking off, but the team members were committed to making sure it was successful. Everybody recognized that it was going to be a fairly short-term project, but a pretty intensive effort, and it was going to require some of the best people that they had on their teams with the right experience. So in the end, when we take a look at the team roster that we had, 13 of 15 team members brought previous PDRI experience to the table, and 14 of the organizations that were represented were already using PDRI. So what that did is we ended up with a multi-skilled team that made it really easy to form our subcommittees to do a deep dive and review on the PDRI categories. There was also a couple key individuals that were really important from an organizational perspective. So Dr. Maddie Safa, who's now assistant professor at Sam Houston State University, joined our team to lead the validation testing. And we engaged him as we were still drafting that statement of work. The other person was Bob Ritter, and Bob was our liaison to the CII organization to help guide us through this first advanced development effort. And Bob joined our team at the project kickoff that took place in St. Louis. Trust and collaboration amongst these sector members was also a really important component of the success. And at the start of the project, as Craig had told us, there was an awareness that there were customizations that had been made, but 4 of the members of the sector actually contributed the full extent of the customizations that they had done. So those were reviewed in advance of our kickoff workshop. We were able to present those findings anonymously, and that was really important input to drive a productive brainstorming session as we reviewed each of the PDRI sections. Now, Craig Relyea, who's now past chair of our sector, Craig was really instrumental in casting the vision of what was possible with this project. He definitely made sure that we all understood the scope and especially the schedule constraints, but I think more importantly, he was the one that encouraged everyone to imagine what was possible with a new way of doing research. So he challenged the team to bring forward any kind of innovative approach that would help bring value to this sector research. And the result was we had a really open-minded approach with the team, and we ended up picking some fairly innovative approaches to do some of those core tasks. And some of the outcomes were we ended up using virtual web conferencing technology for some of the later workshops, and we also used online survey tools, which made it a whole lot more efficient to collect data and do analysis for both the waiting workshops as well as the validation testing. So starting right from our project kickoff, the team acknowledged really quickly that we were probably going to have a pretty intensive 3-month period to get through some of the core tasks of defining the PDRI element list, as well as conducting the waiting workshops. After that, the balance of the work would transition to Valency and Dr. Safa, and that would allow them to complete the data analysis, the validation testing, and draft those final publications for review. So during that intense period of June through mid-September of last year, one of my team was dedicated to coordinating all the efforts for the research group. We were doing a thorough review of the categories and subcommittees, and the experience from the subject matter was within those subcommittees. We were doing bi-weekly team meetings, and that allowed each of the subcommittees to present out their recommendations to the team, and then we were also reviewing action items at that bi-weekly meeting. We also, in that period, conducted our 2 waiting workshops. So one of them was hosted right here in Indianapolis with Eli Lilly, and the other one was a virtual workshop that brought in a lot of international participation. So with some of the background on how we approach this advanced development project, let's go through and we'll highlight some of the outcomes from our PDRI for Manufacturing and Life Sciences project. So I'm going to start with acknowledging that from all the research that we've done, PDRI industrial and buildings are probably the most widely used CII implementation resources that have ever been published by the organization. And truly, it's changed the trajectory of how front-end planning is done worldwide. The challenge that we really had was that PDRI industrial hadn't been revamped since it was first published in 1995. So it kind of begs the question, well, just how much can change in 25 years when we look at front-end planning consideration? So let's take a look at IT as a case in point. If we turn the clock back to 1994, we had Research Team 113 kicking off their development of PDRI Industrial, and I think we would have had our technology award winner, John Fish, probably on that team and here with us again today. So back in 1994, I was the freshman at the University of Waterloo, and I think it was the first year that every student on campus got an email address. The hottest topics in PC Magazine were life after DOS, and then the startling one, the networking revolution, using a dial-up router to put together your first wide area network between your regional offices. So needless to say, information technology didn't quite make the cut in PDRI Industrial. So now let's think about last year when our team was working through the elements for PDRI for MLS. Virtual web meetings were pretty common within the capital projects industry. Emails, texts, and Skype video calls were common communication methods. IT and telecom was in the scope of most of the capital projects for our team members, and cybersecurity was top of mind for every organization at the table. All of these considerations have now made their way into PDRI for MLS. The second major shift that we work through is what I would call process innovation. And CII has just made such a tremendous contribution to the advancement of project management since 1995. But many of those advancements hadn't yet made their way into PDRI elements that were being reviewed by project teams all over the world. So the team made an effort to identify those publications that would have a significant contribution. And I want to just highlight a few of those that were reviewed and the content included in this new template. The first was Research Team 280, Probabilistic Risk Management from 2012. And this formed the basis for us to revamp the risk management element. The next was Research Team 303 on portfolio management, back in 2012 as well. And this ended up forming a new element called Facility Portfolio Coordination. Research Team 310 on effective project alignment for construction success. This really gave us a great basis for updating the project execution category, and it touched owner approval requirements, as well as the engineering and construction plan requirements. The next we get to Research Team 312, Best Practices in Commissioning and Startup from 2015. This contributed to a new element on process and mechanical test plans, as well as an element update around commissioning, qualification, and validation planning. Research Team 314, PDRI for small industrial projects. This was an excellent roadmap that we used on how to combine elements to have a better process flow of how the PDRI sessions worked. And finally, Research Team 322, the Project Controls Improvement Plan, published in 2016. This was a supporting tool as we revamped the project controls category. Now, one of the most important additions in the PDRI for MLS is a new element to assess project cost estimates. One of the things that we found in our research was that PDRI Industrial was the only PDRI template that was ever published without an element to address the cost estimate. Additional elements that were added in this category related to project change control, project cost control, and progress measurement. So I'd like to take a moment to pause here, and if you were a member of any of these teams, could you please stand for just a moment?
Thank you.
All right. Your contributions live on, and you're making such a lasting contribution. So even if it takes a few years, hopefully we'll catch up and make sure these continue to be integrated. So we have a new category in this template called Building Programming and Design Parameters. And the intent is that this should assist all of our project teams in dealing with building-related scope. PDRI Buildings provided the key reference for this, but there were also new elements added to address topics including loss prevention considerations and IT and telecom. During the validation phase, we got great input to help finalize this particular category. And one of those case studies was from Anheuser-Busch in a project where they were increasing the capacity for an existing beverage line. Now, prior to 2017, Anheuser-Busch had conducted thousands of PDRI assessments over a 20-year period. PDRI Industrial was the primary template that they had been using, and PDRI Buildings was being used if they were constructing a new facility. Now, the key challenge that this presented was that it really was up to the facilitator to drive a fairly ad hoc discussion around building programming. And it relied a lot on their previous experience and didn't necessarily always have consistent outcomes. So when Anheuser-Busch went through and tested the PDRI for MLS, one of the feedbacks that they shared was just how pleased they were with how it sparked discussion around circulation and open space requirements, as those were really key considerations as they looked at expansion of this existing facility. Automation has also become an integral part of many capital projects within the MLS sector. And to highlight the magnitude of how much technological advancement we've had in this area, let's think back to 1994 again. Our measurement and our final control devices were pretty simple back then. They usually provided an indication of the process variable, or they responded to a signal to open or close to regulate flow. Today, these are extremely intelligent devices, and they provide such a wealth of information to our manufacturing personnel. However, what we find is it adds complexity to our design and our commissioning processes, and that should also start back in front-end planning to be done really well. So we have a new category called Enterprise and Control Systems, and this has been added to assist the teams in making sure they do a really thorough assessment on the automated interfaces between the enterprise and the control systems. We have another case study that you'll find in the research summary from one of our member pharmaceutical companies. And the project where they were testing was to implement new technologies in high purity water generation. What they had found with Pdri Industrial, that was the current template they were using, is that the instrumentation and the electrical category was fairly outdated, and it didn't match very well with the current automation requirements that were making their way into their projects. So when they went through the testing, this new category really helped the team identify and understand the risks that were in front of them, and it was the action items that they were able to capture that created increased visibility to the complexity that was around automation. So the final PDRI for MLS template includes 83 elements compared to 70 elements in PDRI Industrial. Now, the increase in the number of elements is primarily attributed to the two categories that we've outlined for you. The early feedback from our validation process is that conducting the PDRI for MLS session will result in a fairly marginal increase in the amount of time to complete the session. Overall, we had 42 projects worth an estimated $5 billion in total installed cost that went into the research for this particular template. Now, the weighting workshops were really essential in our research effort, but as we share some of our lessons learned, it was the opportunity that we got to reach out to that broader manufacturing community. And when we reflect on the weighting workshops that we had with 30 participants across the two, 6 of them were from non-CII organizations, but they all use PDRI already. So we were able to engage them in the process, but more importantly, we could highlight CII's changing commitment to drive sector-specific priorities. So PDRI for MLS, it does have some new elements, but I think the good news for us all is that the methodology has no changes. So we still encourage all organizations who want to adopt this practice to continue to follow best practices, like having a neutral facilitator that's independent of your project team, to make sure that you apply PDRI at the appropriate gates throughout front-end planning, to use the same definition levels that we have in the past in assessing elements, to spend time in advance of your session and identify those elements that aren't applicable, and to finally, you're going to interpret those PDRI scores in the same way that you have with existing template. Now, from a change management perspective and considering how to prepare, every facilitator is going to need to spend some time in advance of their first session to review the changes in the elements. I think the best news is that the team recognized this as an implementation critical success factor. So you're going to find an appendix that quickly cross-references all of the changes and cross-references those back to the older templates. Now, feedback that we had from one of the most experienced facilitators on the team that participated in the validation testing was that she felt anyone with experience using PDRI Industrial is going to have a pretty comfortable transition to this new template. And after facilitating my first session using PDRI for MLS this spring, I can personally attest it's going to be a positive transition and definitely a value add for our manufacturing and life sciences organizations. So with that, I'm going to transition it over to Paul Williams to provide our concluding remarks.
So I'll share the final results and the lessons we learned on this journey. I think we achieved our goals. We started maybe a little bit later than we wanted to, but we did finish at the end of 2017. Our target cost was to significantly reduce what maybe had been traditional in research. So we spent about $80,000 versus traditional let's say $250,000. So we certainly had huge savings in getting this new tool out. And in fact, due to the ability to hold virtual meetings, we were able to even cut some of the travel costs down for some of our members as well. We also had external participation from the facilities and healthcare sector, so we know that other groups within CII certainly see value in what we're doing. And the good news is at this point, we now have 4 members of MLS using the tool. And the good news is it's available for you to download. There is a spot on the conference app for download, but we've found that because we've got a large Excel spreadsheet, it's really going to work better for you if you download that on, let's say, a PC or something like that. Okay, what did we learn? Well, we learned a few things. First, that the Sector Leadership Committee in CII is very open to new or different ways to speed up the process and get usable results from our existing tools. We've certainly found that virtual meetings are very successful and they help us get this done with a limited cost, and that there are absolutely opportunities, we think, for every sector within CII to look at the CII knowledge base and to discover existing tools that can be modified or updated to really focus on the needs of a given sector. So we think there's great opportunities out there for quick wins. So what's next? Okay, well, in taking a cue from what we've done so far, the MLS sector has just completed a review of the CII knowledge base. We actually completed an entire review of this much faster than originally we had targeted. And this is great because it's helping to populate a hopper with other opportunities for future advanced development. So out of the 206 topics of CII, we've reviewed all of them. We've identified 23 that show good promise, and we actually have kind of narrowed that down to a short list of 6. And in our meetings tomorrow as a sector, we're going to discuss how we might be able to take advantage of that and maybe pick our next advanced development topic. So thank you for your time today. We are very limited on our time to do Q&A, so I'm just going to do a quick check and see what we might have available.
I think we're out of time.
So I did tell you that the app is available, so that was one of the first questions. And maybe, Craig, you could briefly mention for us, there's one here about, do you see PDRI for MLS replacing PDRI Industrial? Maybe you could just share a quick
real
thought
quick,
on that.
I would say you have to look at the tool. I think, as you've heard, there's a lot of changes to what we did for the PDRI, the things that we added. I think it's applicable to use across many sectors, but that's certainly up to you as a personal decision to take a look at that. We're out of time.
Okay, all right. Maybe one last one, and then we'll be good. Sandra, how do you see us validating the PDRI for MLS in the future? How do we validate the results that have come out of this advanced development effort?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's come up, I think, with other research projects here already this week. And we're going to continue to collect data through the performance assessment program. We've already got Bob Ritter collecting PDRI for MLS data that's coming in for projects specific to our sector. So that's going to be an evolving task and just continue to provide value.
Good. Okay. So I think we are out of time. Thank you very much. If you have additional questions, please stop by the CII booth, and we'll certainly be more than happy to answer the balance of all those questions you've provided this afternoon. Thank you very much.